Good evening or good afternoon, or in some cases, good morning. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy day to be here today. I am very happy to see so many of you business owners, managers, looking to step up the game and start to manage on metrics. We have a quite interesting session today, if I may say so myself. Because if you picture how running your business should look like, this is pretty much what it should be. An organized, smooth flow without any central bottleneck that blocks the progress. But from my experience, this is pretty much what it feels like to run a business. It can be the gridlock where you or somebody else in your team is pretty much the intersection where everything comes together and therefore where everything gets stuck. And if it's stuck at your place, that probably means that it's stuck in the whole business. Before we start, a bit of a housekeeping. I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, put them in the chat box and I will answer them directly if I can, or worst case at the Q&A session at the end. And in order to make it also a bit more interactive, there are a couple of polls in the session. In those, just simply select your answer and we'll discuss them afterwards. And of course, we are recording this session, so we're going to make this recording available afterwards as well for a limited time. To start with a bit about my background, as you probably have guessed, I'm Rob de Braake. I am the founder of Insight Matters. And I've had a long entrepreneurial journey by now that started in the Netherlands, spent a few months in Vietnam working with entrepreneurs in the more social entrepreneurship setting, went back to the Netherlands, started my career in ING Bank, got sent to China, and that is where I launched my first business. And I will cover that a little bit in a second. After that, moved to Thailand and currently living in Hungary. And along the years, I founded a number of companies. The first one in China was SDS Ventures. And basically, this was a technology and investment company. So what we did is we would work with Chinese investors and Dutch investors, pool their money and buy technology rights, buy IP, in Europe to set up a new company in China using that IP. And before I stepped out, we had about 4 companies up and running with just over 20 people on the payroll. And that company is where I learned to work with KPIs, because like that second traffic picture, I was the bottleneck. I was basically effectively the CEO and the CFO of 2 of the companies. That means that every decision went through me. Every detail I had to decide. And in the beginning, that made me feel great because I'm running 2 companies, I'm in charge, it feels great. But along the way, I realized that I was actually holding back those companies. We hired sales managers with the idea that they would become the CEO, but because I was taking all the decisions and I was the bottleneck, I was not only harming the growth of the company, because I only had so many hours a day to work, I was also limiting the growth of those sales managers, simply because they were never enabled to make decisions and I was not managing them on any results or responsibilities. In 2017, I launched a company called Able Finance, a finance and strategy consultancy. And initially we were working with Western-owned SaaS companies in China, but we quickly expanded into all sorts of online businesses, whether it's agencies, SaaS, e-commerce, and in a more global footprint. And early this year, I launched Insight Matters. And the reason why we started Insight Matters is because with Able, we ran into a very interesting problem. I like working with entrepreneurs. I found them pretty much the most inspiring people you can find, and therefore I really enjoy working with them. But it is especially those younger companies that need financial insight, that need financial modeling, forecasting, and the financial foundations in place. But it's exactly those companies that cannot afford the consulting rates. So with Insight Matters, we're trying to be a done-for-you financial reporting and analysis service. Basically, making that knowledge accessible to those agencies and consultancies that can't afford a consultant, don't need a full-time finance person, but do have the need and the benefit from that knowledge. And if you want to categorize me personally, this is exactly where I am. I have the background in finance and strategy, and the part of the work that I love most is the coaching part. So I like to draw on my finance and strategy knowledge to use it in the coaching part. So that is why exactly Insight Matters fits really well with my personal skills. And for me, the goal, and this is of course blatantly copied from Carly Fiorina, the former CEO of HP. The goal is to transform data, financial data in our case, into information, and information into insights. So a quick backdrop on Insight Matters. I'm not going to make this a whole sales pitch because nobody wants to hear a sales pitch. Basically, what we're doing now is we're offering three things: bookkeeping, financial reporting and analysis, that is the core of what we're doing, and fractional CFO services. And that is more the consulting part that used to be in Able. And financial reporting and analysis is the absolute core of what we're doing, because that's where the value is. Translating the information that you get from your bookkeeper into actionable insights, actionable advice that you can use in your decision making, whether you should hire people, whether you should expand into other markets, whether your marketing is profitable or not. All these kind of insights is what we get from there. And the bookkeeping we're basically offering for those companies that are unhappy with their existing bookkeeper or want to level it up. It's not our core focus, but we're happy to do that. So as I mentioned, we're basically providing financial reports analysis that actually help you, that bring value. We bring a dashboard, executive summaries. We walk you through the reports, the analysis, to give you our full picture of the business. How that helps? It helps you grow faster, work more efficient, and feel more in control. So we've done this for a number of companies. For example, Coworker, the SaaS company, the Tena is a SaaS company, Influence Matters, and 1421 are, and MD Clinicals are consultants, and FK is a e-commerce company. So although we are more focused on consulting and agencies, we have done it for a wider range. Well, but I don't want to spend too much time on elaborating on Insight Matters. The critical thing, what we want to focus on, is Angela. And Angela is the founder of a niche consulting company. She is a highly specialized expert. She runs her business in a way that most consultants and most agency owners run their business. They are the #1 expert. And that means that she runs her business on the content. She is the expert. Every question gets to her. That also means that she is the bottleneck in her business, just like I was in China. And she manages on expertise. So she manages on the content. Now, a quick summary about their business to give a bit of a picture on where she is. She has about 12 consultants working for her full-time. They're doing about $1.5 million US in revenue, and Angela is working 80 hours a week. And that's where managing by metrics comes in. What we're covering today is 3 parts. 1, why you should manage on KPIs. 2, how to set your KPIs. And number 3, how to measure and manage those KPIs. Number 1, why you should be managing KPIs. And I am very curious to hear from you. That is why let's start with the first poll. What drives you in wanting to measure, to manage on metrics? Let's give everybody, let's say, a minute or so to cast their vote. Okay, interesting. So this is about, let's see, roughly 50% of you want to manage on metrics because the business is getting too complex. Just under 30 wants to delegate more or work less, and the rest wants to work more, increase the efficiency in the business. Interesting. I'm happy to hear that because that fits fairly well. Because the number one benefit of managing my metrics is control. It allows you to have an organization, have a team that is getting bigger and more complex, and it allows you to bring structure and to simplify it. In other words, you can steer something that is really big towards your goal. And in that sense, the reason I put the pilot picture here is because they are, in a way, the ultimate example of managing my metrics. They're not looking at their gut feeling. They are not looking at the horizon. Of course, they are also looking at the horizon, but the number one thing that they're looking at is their dashboard, their metrics. What's the airspeed? What's the fuel burn? What's the fuel reserve? What's the altitude? What's the direction? Because if you don't focus on those core metrics, it becomes impossible and too complex to fly a plane. Running a business is pretty much the same. The bigger your company gets, the bigger your team gets, the more you need to focus on these metrics so you can keep control and keep an overview of what's actually going on. And the extra benefit, the extra side benefit is this efficiency. Because with the right metrics, if everybody is clear on their metrics, on their processes, on their responsibilities, the whole team should function more smooth. And you can spot, if you have the right metrics in place, you can spot where that smoothness goes out. Then second part, how to set your KPIs. And this is the absolute critical part. And it starts with setting the right goals. And that means that we always start with the question, what are you optimizing for? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to build the next Tesla or the next SpaceX and build a moonshot, a unicorn? Or are you trying to change the world for the better? For example, by cleaning up the ocean or by limiting climate change, by having an impact on renewable energy? Or are you trying to generate a life-changing income for you and your family? Now, keep in mind, whatever your driver is, it is your driver. There is no wrong or right. Whatever your goal is, it is your goal. It's ultra personal. But it is important to make it tangible. If your goal is to make life-changing income, clarify what that means. Is that 100,000 annual income? Is that 5 million in the bank? If your goal is to clean up the ocean, what does that mean? How many kilos of plastic are you trying to remove from the ocean? So make it tangible. If it's not tangible, it's absolutely impossible to know if you're on track or not. And for this, we have our KPI insight process. We really start grinding down on what is your goal for your company and for you personally. Because for you as the owner, your personal goals and your company goals are very much intertwined. And let's again take Angela as an example, because her goal was not as straightforward as we anticipated. We had a couple of conversations with her, and initially, what she mentioned was, I want to maximize the revenue. I want to grow as fast as I can, or I want to be the #1 in my niche. And we didn't buy into that, because none of these actually made her spark. There is no fit between what she was saying and the way she was saying it. So when we poked a bit further, we figured out that her actual goal was to sell the company. And more specifically, she wanted to sell her company in 3 years for at least $5 million. And there was a lot of personal reasons behind that, why she wanted that, but this is really what resonated. And we realized that she was a bit reluctant to tell us initially, because she manages the company on expertise. Her knowledge was the core of the company. So if she would tell everybody who wanted to hear, or her team, that she is looking to sell, that has an impact on the company, that has an impact on the team. So she is very, very secretive about this. So this is why it's so important to understand what the actual goal is. And you don't have to tell that to your whole team, but for you, it needs to be ultra clear, because there's no way you're going to reach your goal if you don't line up your KPIs for it. So now you know your goal, then what's the next step? And the next step is to translate it into KPIs, understanding what are the KPIs that will bring you to your goal. And before we dive into the exact metrics, I want to point out that no matter how much I believe in tracking and managing those key metrics, not everything that you can measure matters. And not everything that matters can be measured. If you're looking at the well-being of your employees, the happiness of your team, your customer loyalty, they are really hard, if not impossible, to accurately measure, but they matter a lot. So keep that in mind when you set the KPIs, that there are things that matter that you can't measure or can't include in these KPIs. Now, as you may know, there are 2 types of KPIs, leading and lagging. And you want to track both, but they're distinctly different, but they're interacting. Lagging KPIs are the ones that are lagging the action. So they analyze past performance. And that means that they're very much result-oriented. They're not action-oriented. Typical lagging KPIs are revenue, profit, and net cash flow. So these are things that are the consequences of what you're doing. There's no way you can take an action that directly, you cannot just take an action to increase revenue. You're taking an action, and the result of that action is that revenue increases. And that may sound a bit like semantics, but it's really important to split the action from the results. So the leading KPIs, they are the ones that are leading the action. They influence future performance, and therefore they are action-oriented. So these are things that you can control, where you have a direct influence on. For example, the number of leads that you have, or the billable rates that you charge, or the number of emails that you send. These are things where you can tell to somebody in your team, this is what I want you to do. This is an action you can take. And the result of that action, for example, the result of sending more emails should be that you have more leads. And having more leads should lead to more clients, and that leads to more revenue. So there's the action and results component of them. But I understand this may be a bit theoretical, so let's drill down into Angela's KPIs. Remember, Angela's goal was to sell the company for $5 million. Now, looking at all sorts of multiples and valuations, we realized, or we calculated, that her goal was to have an operating profit of about $675,000 US. That is a great goal. That is really clear, it's measurable, it's very specific, but it's impossible to manage your team on. If you tell your sales manager, this is your target, they're not going to deliver because it's too vague for them, it's too big for them. So we need to break it down. So the key lagging indicators that underlie the goal, that will bring Angela to her goal, are breaking it down into revenue and profit margin. Based on her existing profit margin, that was about 10 to 12%, we figured that an achievable target for her would be to realize 15% gross margin, net profit margin, sorry. And if you want to realize 675,000 in profit, with 15% profit margin, that means you need about $4.5 million in revenue. And this is already more clear, but this is still hard to manage on. This is still hard to delegate to somebody in your team. So we have to break it down a level deeper. And for that, we're looking at, on the revenue side, her average project size is about 100,000. So actually it was just south of 100,000, but we put the target for her at 100,000. That means that she needs 45 projects per year, closed, paid, and executed. And this gets already much, much more specific, but still it's lagging. On the profit side, we realized that she would need a 30% gross profit margin and keep her overhead at about 55,000 US per month. Because with 4.5 million revenue, 30% gross margin, and 55,000 in overhead, you would get to 15% net profit margin. Again, this is more concrete. This is already much more specific, but it's still lagging. There are still the results of actions that she would have to take. So this is where we get to the leading parts. Because for her to get to 45 projects per year, she needs 100 qualified leads with a 45% closing rate. Whether 45% is achievable or not will depend on your business, but in Angela's case, that was what we estimated that she could achieve. For the gross margin, that depended, she's a traditional consultant, it depends on what rates she can charge her clients, how much are the employee costs, and how billable are those employees. And for the overhead, we basically looked at the marketing spend. Office and all these things were quite flat. So the biggest driver in her overhead was her marketing spend. And this is where you get more specific targets. And if you look at this flow from left to right, you will see that on the left, my left at least, it's the operating profit, which is the ultimate goal, and that belongs to the owner. And the further you break it down to the right, the more you break it down into specific indicators, sub-metrics, the more detailed they get and the more they are lower in your organization. You as the owner are always responsible for the goal. And in a small business, you're pretty much always responsible for the lagging indicators. But your sales manager or your marketing manager can be responsible for the number of leads or the closing rate. But it's critical that you break down your goal into the right metrics. Because if you give your sales manager a metric that doesn't help you or doesn't lead to you achieving your goal, you're basically sabotaging your own progress. If you're not giving your marketer the right number of leads as a target, you're pretty much undermining your own ability to reach your goal. So it's critical that you start with the goal and break that down to levels lower. So for Angela, these were the KPIs. 2 core lagging ones and 6 core leading ones. Now, so far so good, but there are a couple of typical KPI mistakes that I really want you to avoid. The classic mistake is that you measure everything. Because when you want to make everything important, when everything is a key performance indicator, actually in reality, nothing is. For example, in the airline example, in the pilot example, if he keeps track of how many people are in their seats, or how many people are drinking beer, or how many people took the beef meal over the chicken one, it's irrelevant. It's a level of detail that distracts you from what you're doing, and it doesn't help you to get closer to your goal. I've heard horror stories from law firms and retail companies where people had to time track their time to such a level of detail that they would even track the time they spend in the bathroom. And at that point, I just think that you can't be serious. How can that level of detail still give you meaningful insight or meaningful information? The second typical mistake is focusing too much on the details. And the best example I have here is when I was still working in the bank in ING, there was a call center that fell under my department. And the whole organization considered the call center as a cost center. So the whole purpose of it is minimize cost. So one of the key indicators that they were managing their call center agents on was how long is the average conversation with your customer? How long do you spend on the time on each call? Because the bank wanted to minimize that time. Because every minute you spend has an extra cost and therefore less profit. But the result of that metric that was so detailed or not broken down properly, that the result was that agents were basically incentivized to kick the client off the call as soon as possible. So what you got was agents giving wrong advice, rushing through explanations, telling customers to call back later because their second tier support was not available or the manager was not available. And in some cases, even giving the absolute wrong information just because it was shorter. So the result is that customers are not only annoyed, they are more likely to switch and they are more likely to call again. So the total time spent on the phone with the customer is higher. And they missed the biggest one is they missed the opportunity to build the relationship and to build a loyal customer by giving them good service. The third typical mistake is vanity metrics. And vanity metrics are the metrics that make you feel good. They give an adrenaline rush, but they don't add anything to your business. And the most classic examples here are the number of followers that you have or the number of likes that you have on social media. In 99% of the companies, they don't add any value. It's a vanity thing. And I'll be honest, I'm still guilty of this one. Whenever we post content, I still have an eye on how the interaction is and how many likes we get on it. It doesn't help the business, and I still look at it. One note here is The number one most overvalued metric that I consider a vanity metric is revenue. Yes, it's useful, but it's largely vanity. And the simplest way to explain that is, let's say there are two companies. One has a revenue of 1 million and one that has a revenue of 10 million. The one that has 10 million revenue sounds bigger, sounds better. So if you only have this information, you would say the one with 10 million is the more interesting one to own. But let's say that the company with 1 million has a 50% gross profit margin, a 50% net profit margin. And the one with 10 million revenue has 0% profit. That changes the picture. Hands down, give me the one with 1 million revenue. It's a much healthier, better, and more valuable business. So revenue gives an indication of size, but it doesn't say anything about the health or the value of your business. Then I am curious to hear from you, which of these mistakes have you made in the past, or are you making today? And let's give you guys another, let's say 1 or 2 minutes. Perfect. It looks like most of you have voted so far. Yeah, let's close it. I appreciate the honesty. About 40% of you say all of the above, at least at some point in the past. That's it's brave to admit that, because yeah, it's not easy. And the others are fairly even spread out, with vanity metrics, of course, being a bit more prominent. Interesting. Then the third and final part is how to measure and manage your KPIs. And there, processes are the absolute keyword. I am pretty sure that most of you are familiar with the SOP, the standard operating procedure. And working with a good set of SOPs is critical to be able to manage your business based on metrics. First of all, and that goes for the execution of whatever service you're doing as well, but from a management perspective and a finance perspective, every KPI needs to have an owner. So there needs to be at least some person, one person, only one, who is in charge of this KPI, who is responsible to deliver the targets that you as an owner set. That could be for the whole business, or that could be per owner, could be for one KPI or for a cluster of KPIs, but there needs to be one owner. Second is, it needs to be clarified. What information do you need for this to measure this KPI? For example, if your gross margin per client category is an important one for you, you need to have your revenue for each client category and your cost of service for each category. Because without those two data points, you cannot measure your gross margin for each client category. Third one is, once you know which data you need, where can you find that data? Is that going to come from your bookkeeping system, from your payment processor, from your CRM, from your Asana or your Trello? There is no wrong or right, as long as it's clear which data source is the truth for that point. One common problem that we run into is that the bookkeeping is not set up to be the proper source of KPI data. For example, if all your revenue is booked under one line in your bookkeeping, it becomes impossible to track your revenue per category. Or if the time of your team is all booked into the same contractor or employee line and not allocated based on the different types of work that they're doing, it becomes impossible to track the gross margin on your service because you don't know how much time they actually spent. And finally, one person needs to be in charge of reporting. And that could be the same person as the owner, but most often it's your COO, your operations manager, your VA, or your finance advisor. But somebody is responsible to track, to analyze, and to report the data of this KPI. And have a very clear timeline for this. And of course, it's distinctly different from the owner. In the most classic example, you as the owner are responsible for the revenue and the net profit. But you should not be the one who counts the receipts to see if your net margin is good enough or not. Most likely your VA or your bookkeeper or your accountant is in charge of tracking that number and reporting it to you so you can see if you're on track or not. Here as well, there are three common issues that we see. And the first one is the one that I just touched on already, is lack of detail. And that's especially in the financial information. If you sell three types of services, but all your revenue and costs are lumped together, you cannot see your profit per service because you don't have that data. The second one is the timelines. There needs to be a very clear timeline. Who is reporting and when? What we've often seen is people doing their bookkeeping once or twice a year, or bookkeepers that take 4 weeks to turn around last month's books. So it's September 17 today. If you do not yet have your August reports in your hand, it's too slow. You need to have the data fast, ideally in the first week, so it's actually useful for you to make a decision and to change your business in that new month. If you're getting the August results on September 22, there's nothing you can do anymore in September to make an impact. So you wasted a whole month and you're only going to implement the changes based on the August results in October. The third one, and that's a less obvious one, is outdated details. Companies evolve, especially younger companies that grow, they change. So for example, maybe before you had 3 types of services, but now your company changed and you have 5 types of services, or you have 2 services and 2 products. But if your bookkeeping setup, your chart of accounts as they call it, has not been updated, the data quality that you're getting decreases immensely. So on a regular basis, and in my experience, quarterly or semi-annually is the best for that, you need to update with your bookkeeper how do you process the details in your financial information to make sure that they're up to date and that they are suitable for what you need to look at to make your decisions. Angela's process is quite straightforward. For the lagging KPIs, she is the owner, hands down. She is in charge of the revenue and the profit. What we needed to track for that was the revenue per category, the cost of service per category, the overhead cost, and her marketing investments. Because we're focusing purely on the lagging KPIs here. And we wanted that all that information should be able to come from the bookkeeping system. So that means that we had to make some changes in the bookkeeping to make sure that we could get this level of details so we can identify the right information and to see for which of her 3 services her margins were good enough and where she was lagging. And we had to focus on, decided on who is in charge of the reporting. For all the basic financial reporting, her bookkeeper would be in charge. And for everything that is related to the reporting and analysis part of it, we took control. Specifically in her case, the data quality and the timing of the data was the issue. The data quality was mainly on the timesheets and the time tracking of the team. When people group their revenue together or are not accurate in which project they actually worked on or what they've done that time, that really undermined the quality of our data for Angela. The second one was timing of the data. How they used to work was it took the team 1 week to fill out their timesheets. Then the bookkeeper would take 1 week together with Angela to send out the invoicing. And then it took them 2 weeks to do the bookkeeping. So it took 4 weeks from the end of the month to having the data insightful. And as I just explained, that's too long. That wastes a lot of time. So what we've done is we changed the process in cooperation with them. And the result is now that in the end of the beginning of the second week, the reports are ready. And it has a massive impact. Earlier insight, earlier action, they're sending out the invoices earlier, so they're getting paid earlier. Having a tight grip of that process is super, super important. Also, because if your team goes off the rails, if things are lacking, you want to be on top of that. You can only delegate and manage your business on the metrics if you have the timely information. If there's a month or a 2 month time gap between your team going off the rails and you noticing it, you're too late. So, in summary, it starts with set your goals. Break them down into the right KPIs that matter for your business. And this is super, super personal. No two businesses are the same. They're common denominators in the service businesses, but you can't just copy paste your competitors' KPIs into yours. And the third one is set up the right processes. Now you may say that you may feel overwhelmed when you see this, and it looks like a lot of work. And that is because it is a lot of work. And to make sure that you're doing this right, it may help to have an experienced team with you that can help you and guide you through this whole process. And that is exactly what we are doing with the financial game plan. Basically, it is a 4-step process where we have an intake call where we dive deep and hard into your goals. That means we're poking you and trying to cut through all the bullshit to figure out what really, really drives you. What is your business model? What are your plans for the future? And where do you want to take that whole operation? The second part is the analysis. We get access, viewing rights to your bookkeeping system, and we dive into how your system is set up. And we identify, based on your goals, what we believe should be your KPIs. We draft them and we discuss them with you and your team. And once the KPIs are set, we look into your processes and your data. How can you update your processes to get the right data from that? How do you need to change your bookkeeping to make sure that you have the right processes and the right data available for these KPIs? And then the fourth and final step is we draft the roadmap for you, the game plan, so that you can actually implement these changes and manage your own business on the KPIs without our further involvement if you want. So what you get is a breakdown of your KPIs that fit your business and your goal, the data needs, the data sources that you need for that, and the implementation plan, the game plan for you to implement it. So with this game plan, you have a clear path towards your goals. You have the peace of mind because you know that you're in control. You're making better and smarter decisions. You can grow faster, you can save time, and last but definitely not least, you can empower your team to take responsibility and take ownership for a bigger part of their job. And to quote Max Hardy, the founder and the co-founder and CEO of 10x Travel, basically he said we were looking to get a clear vision, to be decisive and prepared, and partnering with Inside Matters was a game changer for them to run their business and to be prepared for the future. Usually this game plan is $795 for new clients. But as I appreciate the time that you're taking out of your busy schedule to join us today, we are giving you 25% off and offering it for $595. So if you want to get a head start to improve your managing your metrics, go to financeinsidematters.com/gameplan and use the code webinar25 before October 1st to take advantage of this offer, to make sure that you are lined up and ready to implement. Now, if there are any other questions, then this would be the perfect time to ask. The one we've got so far that I've skipped so far, sorry for that, Johnny, I missed it in the view, is how many metrics is too many? And the honest answer is it depends. In Inside Matters, we work with dashboards of maximum 12 to 15 metrics, and that combines leading and lagging. If it's more than 12 to 15, people get overwhelmed and it becomes hard to process the information. So if you want to track more things than that, I would suggest to break it down into 2 dashboards, one with the absolute core for you as the owner, maximum 12 metrics there. And then for the other metrics, whether that's your marketing or your operations, maybe set up a separate dashboard and give the ownership of that to your operations manager or your marketing manager. If you're tracking less than 8, I'm going to say you're probably missing out on a lot of valuable data that can reveal a lot about where your business is now or where it's going in the future. How often should I revise the KPIs? Again, depends. It's a horrible answer, I know. If you have a very stable business and you're not changing anything in terms of new products and you have long-term clients and there's a lot of stability, once every year is probably enough. If you're still more early stage and you have some product market fit, but your setup is changing, you're launching new products, you're entering new markets, then probably every quarter is the right frequency to revise and review. You don't want to do it every month because you do need some stability in there to actually be able to track and see improvements and see changes. So quarterly is a nice metric in that case. And Brent, what do you think of profit first? I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with profit first, to be honest. I see some companies where it works really well. And that is if the company is very stable, like fairly flat in terms of revenue or revenue growth, it can work really well. Now, what I dislike about profit first is it sets a fixed percentage for overhead, for marketing, etc. And if you're in a growth stage, you need to invest more in marketing in the beginning. And you have to invest less in marketing, but it definitely is a percentage of revenue and maybe even in absolute terms later on. So if you work with profit first too rigidly and you take it as a percentage, you're going to underspend on marketing in the beginning and overspend a lot on marketing at the end. And that leads to a lot of waste. So, and if you're, for example, if you're growing fast, your revenue doubles. Let's say your revenue doubles in a year. Your office rent, your overhead costs, your hosting costs, they shouldn't double. They should stay stable or grow a few percent, but they should not double. So Profit First can work if you are smart enough with how to set it up and how to implement it in your business. If you take the cookie cutter approach and just unbox it and implement it, I'm not a big fan. If you are smart with the percentages, then I think it can work. If there are any other questions, this is the right time. Then I think that this is it. Thank you guys again for taking the time to join. I hope you got a lot of value from it. And later today, you will receive an email with the link to the recording as well. So if you want, you can view it back at a later stage, as well as the link to the financial game plan. So for now, thanks again, and I wish you guys a very good day.